You know, sometimes the biggest messages aren't the ones that are shouted from the rooftops. Nope, they're whispered, in a language that only a very few people can actually understand. Today, we're going to decode a piece of software that was just sort of released into the wild. No press release, no big marketing campaign, just a silent message written entirely in code.
So this software, it's called the Stellar Pi SDK. That's a software development kit, but it also goes by the name GodHead Nexus. And let me tell you, it was not released for the average person like you or me. It was a very deliberate, very quiet signal, and it was meant for a completely different kind of audience.
So the big questions are, right? Who was it for? And what in the world does this mean for the digital asset we know as Pi? Well, to get to the bottom of that, we've got to unravel this whole puzzle, starting with what this software is actually for and the very specific problem it's trying to solve. All right, let's get into it.
Okay, so this whole story, it doesn't start with some big, splashy launch party. Not at all. It begins with the quiet publication of some open source code. Think of it less like a product pitch and more like a very, very technical invitation.
And I want you to really think about that for a second. Instead of writing up a bunch of promises in a document, the promises are the code itself. The rules are literally baked right in, totally transparent for anyone who has the skills to read it. And that's exactly why its real meaning just flew right over most people's heads. But for a very specific group, it was as clear as day.
So to really get the message hidden in this code, we first have to wrap our heads around the massive problem it's trying to solve. And that problem is this. How do you take a digital asset like Pi, something that's earned by a community, and turn it into something that big, serious financial institutions can actually trust, something they can use as, collateral?
So what exactly is Pi? Well, at its core, it's a system that's designed to track and reward what individual people contribute over long periods of time. You earn it by doing things like daily check-ins on the app or supporting the community. But here's the thing. For the world of big money, of institutional finance, it's not nearly enough. For an asset to be considered real collateral, we're talking something valuable enough to back a loan, it has to pass a whole series of incredibly tough, totally objective tests.
And these 4 tests, they're like the ultimate gatekeepers. First, can you prove, without a doubt, where it came from? Second, was it earned by contribution, not just bought on a whim hoping the price goes up? Third, can it be audited using the exact same standard for every single person, no exceptions? And finally, is that audit result permanent and irreversible? Look, if the answer to any one of those questions is no, the asset fails the test, period. It doesn't matter how popular it is or how big the community is. These are the strict, unbending rules of the game.
All right, so how on earth do you build a system that can actually pass all of those tests? Well, the way it's laid out in the source material is, honestly, it's fascinating. It's like a 3-part machine, and each part is designed to solve one piece of this massive collateral puzzle.
So you've got these 3 totally independent layers. First, you have the Pi network. That's the system where people do the work, contribute, and earn their rewards. Then you have GodHead Nexus. This is an external system. Its only job is to verify those rewards. And finally, you have the Pi Nexus ABN. This is the institutional network, and it only uses assets that have been verified by GodHead Nexus. The most important word here is separate. They are not the same thing. They don't compete with each other. They each have a very specific job to do in this whole machine.
And this next part, this is probably the most counterintuitive, but also the most brilliant piece of the whole design. The verification system, GodHead Nexus, it makes a huge point of saying it has non-affiliation with the Pi network. Now, why in the world would it do that? Doesn't that seem strange?
Well, it's because in the world of institutional finance, the second your verifier is officially part of the thing it's verifying, its credibility just drops to 0. It's gone. I mean, think about it. You can't grade your own homework, right? So an external, totally independent audit layer, that's not just a nice little feature, it is an absolute, non-negotiable requirement.
And we're not talking about small-time players here. For organizations like the IMF, the World Bank, the United Nations, an internal audit is basically meaningless. It's just noise. You can't be your own referee in this league. The entire system had to be built with their rules in mind right from the very beginning.
This analogy here really helps break it all down. Let's think of it this way. The Pi network, that's like the community garden. It's where everyone works together to grow the fruit. Now, GodHead Nexus, that's the independent organic certifier. They're the ones who show up, test everything, and give it that official organic stamp. And finally, the Pi Nexus ABN, that's like a super high-end Michelin star restaurant. They have one simple rule. They will only buy produce that has that very specific, trusted, third-party certification. See how that works? One grows, One certifies, one buys.
And here's how they pull off that independence. The verification, it's not done by some committee that can argue or a company that can be influenced. No way. It's all done using what are called Soroban smart contracts. These are basically self-executing programs where the rules are locked into the code. It means the same input will always produce the same output. It takes human opinion completely out of the equation. It's like turning fuzzy, subjective policy into the hard, predictable laws of physics.
Okay, this brings us to a really critical part of the whole system, a rule so important to the logic of the whole thing that it absolutely cannot be bent. We're talking about a hard line drawn in the sand, and it has everything to do with where the pie originally comes from. And it's really important to get this. This isn't about ideology. It's not a moral judgment or some kind of philosophical argument. It's just cold, hard accounting logic. It's based on the unforgiving principles of verifying where something came from.
So here's the bottom line. Pi that you earn through contribution that has a clean, totally verifiable history, it passes the audit, no problem. But pi that is bought from an exchange, well, its origin is a mystery, it's unverifiable, and the very act of buying it suggests you're speculating, hoping to make a profit. So inside this specific verification system, that is an automatic audit failure. It just doesn't pass.
Which brings us all the way back to where we started. Now that we have all the pieces, we can finally answer that first big question. Who was this silent message, this code, actually for? Okay, let's think about this logically. If the software is built specifically to block any pie that comes from an exchange, and it's not being advertised to the public,
Then clearly it's not for the public, right? Its purpose has to be something else entirely.
The real audience is the developers, the tech people working at banks and at regulatory bodies. That's who this is for. It's a technical invitation. The code itself is saying, hey, here are our rules. Here's our verification engine. Go ahead, integrate our SDK into your systems, and run your own tests. See for yourselves if the pie that passes through our filter meets your incredibly high standards for collateral.
and that is the ultimate cliffhanger, isn't it? The system is built, the code is out there, the silent message has been sent, the whole blueprint is laid out in the open for anyone to see and test. But the final unanswered question remains, will these powerful institutions actually accept these results in their real-world financial systems? That is the great unknown.